Alaska is hiding a 14 billion barrel secret, and the Trans-Alaska Pipeline that was built to carry it is running nearly empty at just 22% capacity. 14 billion barrels. That is more oil than the entire proven reserves of Nigeria, sitting confirmed and mapped beneath the frozen tundra of Alaska's North Slope. Above it stretches 800 miles of steel, one of the greatest engineering achievements in American history, designed to move 2.1 million barrels of crude every single day from the top of the world down to the port of Valdez. Today, it carries 462,000, barely a fifth of what it was built for. And if the flow drops much lower, the oil inside will cool, thicken, and stop moving entirely. So here's the question nobody in Washington wants to answer. With 14 billion barrels confirmed beneath the ground, why is almost nobody drilling for it? To understand how America's most important pipeline ended up running on fumes, you have to zoom out and look at what is sitting beneath it. The U.S. Geological Survey maps every drop of undiscovered oil under federal land in this country. The Gulf of Mexico, the deserts of the Southwest, the shale basins that turned America into the world's largest oil producer. And when the government added it all up, the answer stunned even the geologists. Half of all the undiscovered oil beneath federal lands in the entire United States is not in Texas. It is not in the Gulf. It is in Alaska, locked beneath a frozen plain at the top of the world called the North Slope. This is not a guess. The 2025 USGS assessment confirmed 14 billion barrels of technically recoverable oil sitting under the North Slope right now. Technically recoverable means we know it is there, and we have the tools to pump it. And yet, the one machine capable of carrying that oil to the rest of the world, the Trans-Alaska Pipeline, is slowly starving to death. In 1988, oil raced through this pipeline at full throttle. Today, the flow has collapsed so far that engineers fight every single day just to keep the crude warm enough to move. The pipeline that once delivered 1 out of every 4 barrels of American oil now delivers barely a trickle. This is the story of how the richest oil frontier in America was discovered, drained, and nearly abandoned. And how, right now, in the summer of 2026, a handful of massive new projects are racing against time to save it. Because if the pipeline dies, those 14 billion barrels do not just lose value, they become unreachable. Forever. To see how we got here, you have to go back to a time when nobody wanted Alaska at all. The year was 1867, and the United States had just made what critics called the dumbest land deal in history. Secretary of State William Seward bought Alaska from Russia for $7.2 million. That works out to about 2 cents an acre. Newspapers mocked it as Seward's folly, a frozen wasteland of ice and polar bears. And for nearly a century, that is exactly what it seemed to be. When Alaska finally became a state in 1959, it was the poorest new state in America, surviving on federal subsidies with almost no economy of its own. But statehood came with one enormous gift. The new state government had the right to claim millions of acres of federal land for itself. Most officials wanted land near the cities, near the railroads, near anything useful. One state geologist disagreed. His name was Tom Marshall, and he had spent years studying oil basins in Wyoming. When he looked at the geology of the North Slope, that vast frozen plain along the Arctic Ocean, he saw something familiar. The rock formations reminded him of the great oil fields of the American West. So Marshall made a recommendation that sounded insane. Claim the frozen tundra. Claim the land where oil companies had drilled for years and found almost nothing. Claim the place most explorers were ready to abandon. Almost nobody cared. The oil industry had written off the Arctic. Dry holes, brutal cold, no roads, no ports. Marshall's bet looked like a waste of paperwork. It was a bet on frozen dirt that everyone else had given up on. And it would turn out to be one of the most valuable land claims in the history of the United States. Then came March 1968. And on a frozen drilling pad near a place called Prudhoe Bay, everything Marshall believed was about to be proven right in the loudest way imaginable. March 1968. An Atlantic Richfield drilling crew stood on the ice at Prudhoe Bay State Well No. 1, preparing to test a well that most of the industry expected to fail. Companies had spent years and millions of dollars punching holes in the North Slope with almost nothing to show for it. Many were one dry hole away from quitting Alaska entirely. Then the crew opened the valve. A young geologist named Gil Mull was standing there when it happened, and he never forgot the sound. He said it was like a jet plane roaring overhead, a rumble that shook the entire rig. Natural gas screamed up from the well and ignited into a flare 50 feet tall, a column of fire erupting into the Arctic sky. It burned for more than 8 hours. They had found it. Prudhoe Bay, the largest oil field ever discovered in North American history. 25 billion barrels of crude sitting beneath the permafrost. A single field bigger than anything ever found in Texas, bigger than anything ever found in the Gulf of Mexico. 25 billion barrels is enough oil to fill more than 1.5 million Olympic swimming pools. The frozen wasteland America had bought for 2 cents an acre was suddenly one of the most valuable places on Earth. Oil companies that had been packing their bags turned around overnight. Lease sales exploded. In a single auction in 1969, oil companies paid the state of Alaska $900 million for drilling rights, more money than Alaska's entire yearly budget had ever seen. The poorest state in America was about to become one of the richest. But there was one enormous problem. The oil was at the top of the world, hundreds of miles from the nearest usable port, surrounded by frozen ocean and roadless wilderness, and there was no way to get it out. December 1968. With 25 billion barrels confirmed and no way to move a single drop, the oil industry started brainstorming ideas that sounded like science fiction. Boeing proposed building massive 12-engine tanker aircraft to literally fly the oil out of the Arctic. General Dynamics proposed a fleet of submarines that would haul crude beneath the polar ice. Both ideas were seriously studied. Both were rejected. The answer would be a pipeline, 800 miles of 48-inch steel running from Prudhoe Bay straight down the spine of Alaska to the ice-free port of Valdez. On paper, it was simple. In reality, it was one of the hardest construction projects ever attempted by human beings. The route crossed 3 mountain ranges and more than 800 rivers and streams. It crossed earthquake zones and hundreds of miles of permafrost, ground that stays frozen year-round. A warm oil pipeline buried in permafrost would melt the ground beneath it and sink, so engineers lifted more than half the pipeline into the air on 78,000 vertical supports, many fitted with special heat pipes that pull cold air into the ground to keep it frozen solid. Think about that. In Alaska, they had to refrigerate the earth itself just to keep a pipeline standing. Roughly 70,000 workers poured into some of the most remote terrain on the planet, working through winters that hit 60 degrees below zero, cold so severe that bare skin could freeze to metal in seconds. They finished the entire thing in just 3 years. The final cost was $8 billion in 1977, more than $43 billion in today's money, the largest privately funded construction project in world history at the time. On June 20th, 1977, the first barrel of Prudhoe Bay crude began its journey south. America's Arctic oil machine was alive. And what it did next transformed Alaska beyond recognition. By 1988, the Trans-Alaska Pipeline was running at full roar. Prudhoe Bay alone was pumping more than 2 million barrels of oil every single day, and the pipeline carried it south in a river of warm crude. The trip from Prudhoe Bay to Valdez took just 4.5 days. At its peak, this one pipeline carried 25% of all the crude oil produced in the United States. One pipe, a quarter of American oil. Tankers lined up at the Valdez terminal around the clock, loading a fresh ship with Arctic crude nearly every single day and sailing it south to refineries along the West Coast. The money changed everything. Oil revenues flooded the state treasury so fast that Alaska abolished its state income tax entirely. Lawmakers created the Alaska Permanent Fund, a giant savings account fed by oil money, and started mailing every single Alaskan a dividend check every year just for living there. Workers with no college degree were earning six-figure wages on the slope. Anchorage boomed. Fairbanks boomed. A modern industrial city of drill pads, processing plants, and airstrips rose out of the tundra at the top of the world, a place so remote it cannot be reached by ordinary roads for most of the year. Alaska had gone from the poorest state in the Union to one of the richest per person on the planet, and it happened in less than a generation. All of it. Every school, every dividend check, every snowplow, every state trooper. All of it rode on one 48-inch steel tube. Nobody wanted to think about what would happen when the oil slowed down, because everyone knew the truth, even in the middle of the boom. Prudhoe Bay was a finite pool. It was not limitless. It never was. And in 1988, at the very peak of the celebration, the great field quietly tipped over the edge and began to decline. The golden years were already ending. Most Alaskans just didn't know it yet. Fast forward to 2019. BP, the company that helped discover Prudhoe Bay and ran it for half a century, packed up and sold its entire Alaska business. ExxonMobil sold too. The giants that built Arctic oil walked away from it. The numbers explain why. In 1988, the North Slope produced more than 2 million barrels per day. Today, the entire slope combined produces around 462,000. That is a collapse of nearly 75%. Alaska once supplied a quarter of America's crude. Today it supplies about 4%. Imagine a 4-lane highway at rush hour with 3 lanes completely empty. That is the Trans-Alaska Pipeline right now. And the slowdown creates a problem most people never think about. Oil in that pipeline leaves the ground warm, around 100 degrees. The faster it moves, the less time the Arctic has to steal that heat. In 1988, the journey to Valdez took 4.5 days. Today, the same 800-mile trip takes 18 days. The oil crawls south at barely walking pace, cooling with every mile, thickening like syrup left in a refrigerator. Wax starts separating out of the crude and coating the inside of the pipe. Ice can form. Engineers now run heaters, send cleaning devices called pigs through the line, and recirculate the oil just to keep the system alive through winter. Every winter, the fight gets harder. Every year, the margin for error gets smaller. The operators know it, and the state of Alaska knows it too. The pipeline was never designed to run this empty. Its own success built the state, and its decline now threatens everything the state stands on. By the way, if this story is blowing your mind, every subscriber is automatically entered into our monthly giveaway for a branded hoodie. Details are in the description. Because what comes next is the part that should worry everyone. This pipeline does not just slow down forever. Below a certain flow rate, it dies. And Alaska is closer to that line than almost anyone realizes. There is a number that keeps Alaska's engineers awake at night. 350,000. That is roughly the minimum number of barrels per day the Trans-Alaska Pipeline needs to operate safely. Below that threshold, the oil moves so slowly and arrives so cold that the whole system starts to fail. Wax clogs the line. Water trapped in the crude can freeze. In the worst case, 800 miles of steel filled with cold, gelled oil becomes an 800-mile problem that may never restart. Alaska is currently producing about 462,000 barrels per day. Do the math. The buffer between a working pipeline and a dead one is barely 100,000 barrels. One major field failure, one bad decade of decline. That is all it would take. And here is what makes this different from anywhere else in America. There is no backup. Not a second pipeline, not a railroad, not a fleet of tanker trucks. Nothing. The Trans-Alaska Pipeline is the only way North Slope oil reaches the world. In the lower 48, if one pipeline shuts down, oil finds another route. In Alaska, if this one system fails, every drop of oil on the North Slope becomes stranded. 14 billion barrels, confirmed by the US government, locked in the ground with no way out. It gets worse. Under the pipeline's federal agreements, if it ever permanently shuts down, it must be dismantled and removed. The supports, the pump stations, the steel itself. Gone. There would be no mothballing it and coming back in 20 years. A shutdown is not a pause. It is an ending. Which is why everything now depends on a race happening on the North Slope at this very moment. New oil. Enough of it, fast enough, to keep the line alive. May 2026. 2 months ago, on a drilling pad near the Arctic Ocean, a valve opened and crude began flowing from a brand new field called Pikka, the first major new oil development on Alaska's North Slope in decades. Pikka is ramping up toward 80,000 barrels per day by the end of this year. And it is not alone. To the west, ConocoPhillips is building Willow, a project so promising it confirmed 600 million barrels in a single field. Willow is already more than half built, with first oil expected in 2029 and peak output around 180,000 barrels per day. ConocoPhillips believes nearby prospects connected to Willow's infrastructure could hold another 3 billion barrels. And they are drilling new exploration wells this winter, hunting for the next Prudhoe Bay before the current projects have even peaked. State officials in Juneau are watching those rigs the way farmers watch the sky in a drought. This is why the 2025 USGS assessment matters so much. 14 billion barrels, technically recoverable, much of it beneath ground that already has roads, drill pads, and processing plants nearby. The federal government now expects Alaska's oil production to rise in 2026, the first meaningful increase since 2017. For a pipeline slowly starving to death, these projects are not just business deals. They are a blood transfusion. Every new barrel raises the flow, warms the line, and pushes back the day the crude gels solid in the steel. But look closely at the numbers and the tension is still there. Pikka and Willow together add roughly 260,000 barrels per day at their peak. The aging fields they are propping up keep declining underneath them, year after year after year. New oil is buying time. Waiting underneath it all is the real question. Is time enough? Remember that image from the beginning. 800 miles of steel, built for 2.1 million barrels a day, carrying 462,000. Now you know what that number really means. It is not just a statistic about an aging pipeline. It is a countdown. Beneath the North Slope, the geology has already given its answer. 14 billion barrels, confirmed, mapped. More oil than Nigeria's entire proven reserves, sitting under permafrost at the top of the world. The oil is not the question anymore. The question is the machine built to carry it, and whether America can feed that machine fast enough to keep it alive. Willow is under construction right now. Pikka is flowing right now. New money is moving north for the first time in a generation. Exploration rigs are hunting for the next giant field this winter. If they succeed, the Trans-Alaska Pipeline could run for another generation, and Alaska's second oil boom will have arrived just in time. If they fail, the flow keeps falling toward 350,000 barrels a day. The oil cools, the wax builds, and one winter, the most ambitious private construction project in history becomes scrap metal by federal agreement. 14 billion barrels of American oil becomes a treasure locked in a vault with the key thrown away. And here is the uncomfortable truth this story leaves behind. The hardest part was never finding the oil. Nature did that work millions of years ago. The hard part is everything we built to reach it, because steel ages faster than geology. 40 years ago, this pipeline was the beating heart of American energy. Today, it is fighting for its life, one barrel at a time. If stories like this remind you that the massive systems we all depend on can fail with little warning, grab our free disaster preparedness toolkit. The link is in the description. Alaska's 14 billion barrel secret is not buried in the ground. It is hanging by a thread of steel, 800 miles long, running quietly toward empty.